So in this interview, I get to speak with Paul Avins. Paul Avins is an exceptional business leader and an exceptional coach, working with many very successful business leaders in their own right. One of the things we talk about many different things in this interview actually. One of the things we talk about is how valuable it can be to work alongside other business owners and team leaders. So there can be really sort of idea of sort of cross-fertilization, taking ideas from one industry into yours or vice versa can really unlock opportunities and unlock doors. So that was really valuable. We talk about profiling tool that Paul's actually built to help build the teams and how valuable and important building a team is. And Paul learned that the hard way when he was trying to do everything himself, and actually led to some very serious medical issues. And Paul's medical challenges have been more significant than mine, but I can relate to that. I've also had times where, just working too hard, working inefficiently, didn't have the right team around me, and that really led to a kind of physical crash, I suppose is the only word I can really think of. So that really resonated with me, and it talks a lot about getting in flow, staying in flow, find out what the subjects that you need to deal with to keep you in flow, and building that team to deal with the other areas that you need in business. That made a lot of sense. It talked about the pendulum element as well, which I'd never heard of before, and that made huge sense to me as well. Anyway, that's just a few of the many things that we cover in this interview. So let's dive in.
Here I am with Mr. Paul Avins, and I'm assured he has a fresh set of boxer shorts on. It's a long story, we won't go there. So Paul, I haven't reconnected till very recently. It's been a very long time since we actually met in person, many years ago. So it's very good to have you back and have you on this call today.
Thank you, man. I appreciate the opportunity. Appreciate it.
And you're looking like you're in sunny Oxford. Is that right?
Yeah, we're in beautiful Oxfordshire here in the heart and the middle of the United Kingdom, just on the border of the Cotswolds. Yeah.
Okay, very nice part of the world. Very nice.
It is.
So I want to dive straight in. And the last time we met, which many physically met, was a long time ago in your office, and you were running an event there. Now I can't actually remember the name of it now. Was it Fast Forward?
I think you spoke at one of my early Mastermind meetings when we just started running Masterminds. That was seven or 8 years ago. We just started running Masterminds. So obviously you've been doing that now for over 8 years. You came along and spoke when you launched your book, right?
That's right. Yeah, it was the Rich Poor Ad book. I was doing a lot of mobile applications there. Yeah. And now spread out, do a lot more digital products now as well. So one thing I wanted to touch on was, you had a really a good group there, and there's a lot of energy in that room. I want to talk a little bit about the benefits of working kind of alongside other business owners and entrepreneurs, because at least for me, I found business is pretty tough, at least at times. It's not always a smooth ride, and I think there's definitely some benefit of going through some of that journey alongside other people that can kind of understand that journey.
Yeah, so I can tell you a story because I think that's kind of relevant in terms of how we got to where we're at, right? So I've been coaching, consulting, training entrepreneurs for well over 17 years now. So I've been doing it for over 17 years. So I was right at the beginning of the whole business coaching and kind of profession when it actually really kind of gave birth, right? But up until that, I'd been a very successful entrepreneur and then a spectacular failure. So, I'd made a lot of money by the time I was 30. And then I'd lost it all by the time I was 32. So, I had this kind of passion for learning and a passion for sharing. And I've always been fascinated with the question, which is what makes something work, right? So like, why does one business in one industry dominate, become really successful and do fantastically well? And then 2 or 3 others who might have had better products or better funding, they don't make it. Like, what is the difference that makes the difference, right? And the reality, the cold hard reality is that less than 10% of businesses ever make $1 million, right? So like, just to put that in context, now, £1 million, less than 10% of people that start a business ever get above £1 million in revenue. And that's a shocking statistic.
Hard to believe, actually.
Yeah, well, if you're currently watching this or listening to this and you're over $1 million, congratulations, you're in the top 10. But there are specific things and strategies that the people who build what we like to now refer to as a grown-up business right? Like a grown-up business, do that people who just enter the kind of lifestyle business at, you know, 500,000 and stuff like that, don't do. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not a judgment. I'm just saying there's a significant difference between what you do to make money and have a nice lifestyle and what you do to start building an asset that becomes worth 7, 8, you know, figures in terms of if you want to exit it, actually building real wealth rather than just generating cash flow. Mm-hmm. There's a fundamental shift in that. And, you know, I started my career out coaching one-to-one. I ended up doing, you know, that for nearly 10 years. But there was always an element that the changes in my life had happened as a result of being in a room with other people. I've often said that running a business is one of the most lonely places on the planet, right? It is incredibly isolated. You are limited by who you can actually have a conversation with. You know, if you're it's for yourself and it's by yourself, then all the pressure's on you. You can't go home and talk to your family about it because they're not going to understand. And if you talk to them about cash flow problems, they're just going to worry, right? If you go and tell your wife about that or your partner about it. If you talk to your team about worrying about, you know, will the business make it through this crisis? Will we be here in 3 months' time? They're all going to start looking for another job. So you have to have this level of as a leader about the future when you may be feeling very uncertain inside. Yeah. And there are very few safe places to go and have a conversation and be vulnerable about, I'm struggling with this, I'm worrying about that, you know, it's an issue for me, I don't know how to solve it, right? And I've always been, and I actually got it here, look, I've always been a kind of avid learner and reader, and I read this book, and you can see, Think and Grow Rich, this is the Mastermind edition, interestingly.
I was about to say, that looks like supersized.
Well, it's supersized because I make loads of notes in here, which is why I like this. But in this chapter, he talks about the power of the mastermind and the fact that, you know, the concept is not a new concept. It's been around for centuries. The mastermind that, you know, people like Henry Ford and John D. Rockefeller, and you had who has Andrew Carnegie. They were all in a mastermind, and they would meet. They would go camping for two or 3 days over a weekend, and they would just sit around campfires and talk about how they could change the world, and they would learn from each other. And you look at the most people in the world have people that they share, talk, and they remove themselves from this isolated trap of we have to be self-made, right? It's the biggest myth that constrains most people is that I want to be a self-made millionaire. Well, none of us are self-made. Nobody's ever self-made, right? You don't do it by yourself. You don't do it on your own. You need a team. You need people around you. And ultimately, you need to be in an environment where you can be vulnerable and you can get feedback. And it's, for me, the best way to do that is in a group of like-minded people, which is what Napoleon Hill about in his book, right?
Yeah.
So when I started testing this concept and running, where you were very early in the process of running this, we just modeled what Napoleon Hill talked about. So, you know, there are 12 businesses from different industries, non-competing, which is quite it's a very different thing, actually. When everybody who teaches in the coaching space said, oh, you should niche, you should have everyone in one industry. And I was always like, that doesn't make sense to me. I want to learn from people who are not in my industry, right? And frankly, I got really fed up with getting on a plane and flying to America 2 or 3 times a year to go to masterminds, because the only ones I could find were in America. And I went, right, well, look, what if I created a mastermind for grown-up business owners, people who are either very close to $1 million in turnover or are above $1 million, and we set out to create a room that I would be in, so that if I wasn't running it, I would want to be in it, right? That was kind of my vision. And that's what we did. And, you know, the reality, we've got this amazing group, F12 Mastermind. You know, we tag it as the Business Growth Boardroom. And it's a place where people can come once a month. They can share stories to inspire others. They can share things they're scared about, stuff they're worrying about. They can ask for help. They can get support. And whilst they're in a business of their own, they are no longer on their own.
Yeah.
And that changes everything, because now you give you a great example, quite a great story from February this year, before we all kind of went into the crazy lockdown stuff. But when we met in February, there was a client of mine in the room. He's been in the market 8 years. So if you're in it for 8 years, you don't stay in a group for 8 years unless you're getting a good return on your investment. Add to the fact he's one of the UK's top tax accountants, and he measures the numbers. So he knows what his return on investment is for being in that room, right? Anyway, he had a strategy he wanted to do in his business, and he was all in, and he put the money aside. He was really on the point of signing contracts. And I said, look, before you do it, run it by everybody in the room, right? Because you've got 11 other smart people, and you should sanity check this before you do it. What's really interesting is he was absolutely, I asked him the question, I said, on your level of certainty, how certain are you that this is going to be a great decision? And he said, oh, 10 out of 10. This is definitely what we need to do for the business. Anyway, so we did a growth seat and we went through his plan and everybody asked him questions. And at the end of the room, I went around and said, right, based on what he's planning on doing, if you're a customer of his, are you more likely or less likely to do business with him as a result? Without exception, all 11 other members went less likely to do business with you. And 2 of the members who were already customers with his in the room said, if you do that, I will pull my business from you and go elsewhere.
Wow.
And it was a real shock to his system of like, holy crap, what do you mean? I thought this idea, what do you, and I said, and this is the difference between thinking about something that you think is a great idea in a bubble and putting it in front of people who are real paying customers and getting real feedback. And I said that one growth seat probably saved him £150,000 in hard cash that he would have wasted, let alone the time, effort, and energy, but hard cash he was about to invest. And I've always said it's a lot easier to avoid an iceberg than it is to hit one and try and recover.
So again, a lot easier to see one.
No, it's to avoid an iceberg.
Oh,
right?
yes,
so
yes.
If someone else says, if you keep going, there's a massive iceberg and you're going to hit it, rather than go, no, I'm going to keep going. And then you hit the iceberg and then you spend 2 years trying to recover, right? It's a lot easier to avoid it than to recover from it. So it's, if you sit, and I say to somebody, I said, imagine this, right? I said, people, even if you run a business of £1 a year turnover, right? You're running the same business. So if you run it for 10 years, what you've basically done is take 1 year's experience and multiplied it, but it's not that different. It's the same thing. If you sit in a room for a year or 2 years and you see 12 other businesses go through the growth cycle that we teach, you've actually got 12 years of experience in 1 year. That's what you've done. You've learned from 12 other businesses or 11 businesses go through the cycle that you're through. Every month for a year, you've learned, and your learning has jumped, by a factor of 11.
Yeah.
You've got 11 years experience in one. Now you go out into the world and you are so much more ahead of your competition. It's not funny, right? Let alone the stuff that I teach and the coaching that I give. And that's the power of being in the right room with the right people.
That makes
sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And this sort of idea of sort of cross-fertilization and they always say that nothing's original. And you mentioned Henry Ford earlier. So good example there where, he had a situation where he's trying to manufacture cars and find an efficient way to do it. And the obvious question was, well, how quickly can we move the workers around the car, the car parts to assemble it? And then he looked at the assembly line on the butchers, and they've got all the cars or the meat on hooks, and then what's coming around on a conveyor belt. Went, well, why the hell don't we do that? So, a lot of other industries and other people have already solved basically the same problems that we have, and we're not aware of it. And as a creator, I'm probably guilty of this as well. It's almost too tempting to go into creation mode because it's a fun place to be, I think. But it's a lot smarter to have look sideways sometimes. It could be somebody else in the same industry, but it could also be a totally different industry. Unless you've got some eyeballs in those industries, it's going to be very hard to find. And I think in a company, they always say it's actually quite healthy to have a bit of a turnover of staff because you're going to get new ideas come in. People have worked in other companies. They come in with different ways of doing things. And if we're in a small business, we don't get that. We probably don't have a higher turnover of staff, or maybe don't even have a big team. So
maybe don't even have a big team. Yeah. I mean, and I think so. Like another good example, it's a great example, by the way. And another one would be that, Ray Kroc was in his office frustrated by the long lines and queues outside the McDonald's, and he looked to his left and there was a bank, and the bank didn't have queues at lunchtime, and he was like, well, how's that working? Well, the bank had a drive. You literally drive up, deposit, collect, take money out, and it was drive through. And he's like, well, why don't we do the same thing in McDonald's? Why don't we have a drive through? And it's like, the reality is that the best insight, I always say, listen, the best idea for your business is not going to come while you're sat behind your desk working. Right? Your next big idea and insight is probably not even going to come from you. It's going to come from somebody in the industry and going, why don't you just do this? And you go, well, that's a really good idea. Because within about 10%, everybody is pretty much doing what everyone else in your industry is doing.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think we're we're often looking at what is the best business process. And after we've been working a while, we all like to think we're smart people, and we start to refine our service or our product, and we think we're getting close to a a smooth service. But that's constantly changing, and sometimes you need this outside perspective, as you say, to give us that sort of light bulb moment. Go, why the hell don't you just do it like this? Okay, so what about yourself? Can you think of an example for yourself where perhaps, you was trying something and someone just came along and went, why don't you do this instead? Or?
I think there's so many over the career that I've had so far. Just to break it down, I'm focused on solving 3 problems for entrepreneurs now, right? So, I've got 3 different, and they solve the 3 biggest problems that I've seen in the 17 years of coaching and working with people, right? And those 3 problems simply break down to this. And if you're listening to this or watching this, then, take a piece of paper and see which one of these is the biggest issue for you. But if you want to build a grown-up, scalable business, then these 3 things will at some point become a problem. So number 1 is having that support system for you so you're not in isolation, right? That's the first thing, yeah? Because we don't have time or money to learn by trial and error. It's too expensive. We don't have the time. So that's the first thing. I do that through the mastermind groups that I run and the inner circles and stuff. Second one is that if you're going to grow anything significant size, that's when you're going to need other people. You'll need a team. Right? So you'll need to get the team, what we call the team dynamics, right? You'll actually need to be able to recruit, retain, develop top talent, because it isn't going to, that's basically another form of mini mastermind within your own company, but you're going to need the right profiles, bringing the right level of contribution to your business at the right time, right? And we have a separate company that specializes in doing that. I own a profiling company that profiles people around their contribution and the value you need them to add to or want them to add to the business. The third thing is this ability to what I call consistently attract customer flow. Okay. So for me, it's like, as businesses start to grow, they get to a problem where, and you might have experienced this as well in your world and seen it, where they start selling one-to-one, right? And the business are doing all the selling, and that's great. And then they start to get more. And after a while, the challenge is if you're still selling one-to-one, you're never going to be able to scale the business. So you've got to have a scalable selling system. And that's really using kind of online platforms to sell one-to-many. So we have I have a completely separate business that deals with called Sales Funnels Online, which builds automated selling systems for companies that want to scale. And we use technologies and platforms and tools that are out there so that you can sell one-to-many, or that you can have a salesperson working 365 days a year without taking holiday, without needing a pay rise, and they work on commission only. And it's like, that's the best selling system in the world you could have. So like, those are the 3 problems that I've seen that stop people getting to this 7-figure barrier. And therefore, just looked at it and went, if I'm going to solve 3 problems in my life, I had a very profound life-threatening situation 6 years ago. It was like, well, look, if I'm going to come back and I'm going to have the chance to serve people, I need to serve them in a way that solves problems. And those were the 3 biggest things that I'd struggled with in my career. That also things that I'd had some spectacular failures, like launching a business in Australia without understanding how, an online sales form, and having the thing just collapse and cost me a fortune, and going, do you know what? I need to go figure that out. Who do I need to go? I need to go and get in a mastermind. I need to learn someone who's already been there, done it. Yeah. And it's about that. Look, one good idea, but it isn't just the idea. And this is, I've said this for years, is that you get paid on what you get done. Ideas are easy, right? Ideas are easy. And the key thing here is ideas are perishable. Ideas are perishable. So anytime you have so we teach this to all of our clients, is anytime you have an idea, you have 72 hours to take action on that idea, or it's already dead. It's already dead. So like, anytime, it's about the ability to shift it from a thought and an idea to an action and start implementation, and what I call execution excellence. So it's like, if the difference between people who make it and don't, in my experience, isn't that the ones that make it have a better idea. It's that they have a better team and they have the better ability to execute on the idea that they do have. So,
yeah, I think that's very true. I mean, I used to obviously speak to a lot of people around mobile apps, and particularly in the earlier days where it was, almost a little bit like a gold rush then. And of course, I had a lot of conversations. I've discovered the best new thing. And it's okay, well, there's somebody somewhere else having a conversation very similar to this. Could be in a different continent, right? They're probably having a similar conversation to this. One of you is actually going to do something about it. You've got to decide if you're going to be the one. I don't know if you should or shouldn't, but it's about taking action at the end of the day. And yes, ideas are great, and it's a starting point. And I'm always a little bit reluctant to kind of talk down ideas, because they are the igniter. That's the sort of the fire that gets us started. But it is just it's like the start gun for the 100-meter sprint. You haven't actually got anywhere yet. You know, it's just that impetus.
But what's interesting, Simon, is that in Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill actually says in it that the universe gives the same idea to multiple people at the same time, because it wants to make sure that the idea gets done, but it can't trust who's going to do it. So the minute you have the idea, and there's an old story that says every time Michael Jackson had an idea, he would ring his manager up and go, "We have to do this now because Prince is going to have the same idea, and if we don't do it first, he'll do it." It's like you get the idea and 10 other people get the idea. It's now about who executes on it fastest and who actually gets traction with it. They're going to win. Now, the reality is there are tons of other things that go into making a successful business other than execution, but execution will pretty much trump everything else. If you are able to pull off stuff, if you're able to get stuff finished and completed, then, it's the difference. My experience, that's the thing that moves the needle. Because if you don't finish stuff, it's about who you need around you to help you finish stuff. It's not you finishing stuff. It's about who do I need to have help from to get this finished. It isn't what do I need to do. It's the shift that I talk about when you go from me thinking to we thinking, which is what happened when I got seriously ill. Couldn't do it. Trying to do it all on my own nearly killed me. Yeah. Literally nearly killed me. I ended up having a serious heart attack, being clinically dead for 4.5 minutes.
Jesus,
I was 42 years old, and I was 42 years old, and if it wasn't for a team of medics, I would be dead right now. And, wow. When you get a second chance to look at your life like that, you have to ask the question about like, what did I do where did I go wrong? Right. Like, and for me, it became all about me, all about ego. It became about how cool I am, how great I am. And actually it's nothing to do with that. It's about teams. Every business that I'm fortunate enough to be running right now, based on a team of people. It's based on teams. And, it's teams is the thing that unlocks the future that most of us want, but most people don't know how to do it, don't know how to build it, don't know how to construct it. And they're worried about payroll, or they're worried about stuff that kind of goes into it. Right.
For sure. So I think, right now we're always at a unique time, right? But at the moment, if you're a small business, a solopreneur, you could rightly, I think, consider employing lots of robots and I'm sure many people are, rather than a traditional human being team. I think an individual can go a long way now in a bit. Instead of 20 years ago, you'd order, have a secretary just to book meetings in your diary. Now you just send them a link to your Calendly, right? And they book themselves in. And we can go a long way without a team as such. Do you think that there's still a very big cap on how far you can go with robots, for want of a better expression?
Well, how about we use the word technology rather than robots, right?
Okay.
I think if so, number one reason that people give you for not doing well is that they don't have the time, right? They'll say, "I don't have the time. I can never get around to getting it." All that stuff, right? Time is just an excuse for two things. Number one, you haven't built the right team. You haven't learned or got coached or got helped or understood the tech that you need. So if you want more of this, it's going to come from one of those. That's the only way it comes from it, right? Because the key thing is with two things here, they both provide this, leverage. So ultimately, you know how to get leverage in your life, because there aren't enough hours in the day to do it all. So it's going to come down to either which could be apps to book people in your diary and this and that and the other, right? Or it's a team, and team can be gig economy, team can be part-time. I mean, I have a team of 8. 6 of them work in the Philippines. I don't know them. I've never seen them. They're managed by my manager. My business partner runs them in the UK. Got another business which is run by 2 amazing ladies who both work 4 days a week, 6 hours a day. So you can build teams without it having to be full-time and get trapped into that. But you've got to realize that your goal is to use leverage to buy back your time so that you can come up with the next insight, innovation, or idea that's going to move you forward, right? Because ultimately, too many people are stuck in the do space, so they never get the value that they need to move forward, right?
Yeah, I think that's a great little simple but really great diagram, because at the top there, we all have exactly the same number. We all have 24 hours. We all might whinge about it, but we all actually, that's the only area where we are all identical. Richard Branson has the same amount of hours as I do, et cetera, et cetera. That's probably the only thing we shouldn't whinge about, but we all tend to do it, right? all the other areas are areas we can affect. That is where things change, and you know, got the multiple. So I'm really quite like that you sort of said that, because you know, I'm a bit of a digital guy. I guess I do rely a lot on tech and turn to tech. And yeah, I'm one of those people that wouldn't want to, it would scare the life out of me to have 10 people on a full-time payroll. And I do employ staff, but I do have a lot of, yeah, I call them robots, but tech to leverage my time, to distribute messages so that I can be efficient. And I do think that efficiency is a critical part of it.
Well, yeah, it's about effectiveness as well, right? You can be.
Yeah.
I always say it's not the hours you put in; it's what you put in. Okay, so like, but fundamentally, if you don't understand how to use a team and how to use technology, you're never going to scale to any significant size, because you will run out of the commodity that you are frustrated by, which is time. And the key to self out of the trap is to use technology and team.
Yeah.
That's
and if anyone's ever trying to get funding, and you go along to that, and also you're going to present who your team are, you put a team in front of them. It doesn't have an IT guy. That's their own job, a techie, what do you want to call them. There's no chance. You know, that's one of the first things they want to see, that they have some in-house technical capability, whatever the industry. It's an absolute requirement. And I remember actually arguing against that. So, well, if we don't have them inside and we can go to different people and we can use the different skill sets, no, get out the queue. You're not, not even entertaining it. So it's, yeah, clearly a massive thing, and it's just, growing and growing continually. And it's hard to keep up sometimes.
But I think that's where it's about having. That goes back to the conversation I was saying before, which is, look, you figure out what is the contribution that you want somebody to make to your business, right? If you want the contribution that team member to make being they're going to contribute the technology skills, then that's going to define who you recruit, how you write the ad, where you go find them, and what kind of role it is. So, but it starts with the contribution I want from this person, not what's the profile or what's the job description. Job descriptions are horrible things. They put people in boxes, and inevitably businesses don't work in boxes, right? They're very fluid, very dynamic, very living, breathing things. And then ultimately it's about flow. It's this conversation I've had all the time. It's about flow, right? If you understand the kind of flow of information you need in your business, you won't understand the kind of, you need to manage that. So it's like, within all of this, the reason over 17 years of doing this, I've now learned that you will struggle to build any sustainable, scalable business if you do not have a team, if you do not have automation around your sales system and process, so you're not reliant on really expensive, really hard to manage salespeople who are they're a nightmare, right? Like running sales is a horrible thing to do. And if you don't understand that technology, then you're going to be in trouble. And fundamentally, if you don't have some support for you as a leader to grow your skill sets, your abilities, and to push you, look, there's a reason why sports professionals, and I was watching a documentary on Tiger Woods. Look, Tiger Woods, the reason why he achieved everything he achieved in his life, come back from all the massive challenges he's had, is why? Because he's got a good support network around him. He's got people around him. Sports people do not expect to get to the top of their game on their own. They need people to push them. They need people to, where's the extra inch? Where's the extra little bit of stretch? How do I get, you don't get there on your own. You just don't. Yeah. So it's like, look, you can be really successful, right, at a certain level, but there's a level that you won't reach without pushing you.
Yeah, and you think about some of the most, for want of a better word, isolated positions. A tennis player, that's about as individual a sport as I can instantly think of. An actor, an actress, it's an individual skill. But when they get up on stage to lift the trophy, the first thing they're doing is saying, thank you to this person, thank you to that, because they know they've got a team, be it, the dietitian, the tennis coach, the golf coach,
let's use that example, right? Let's use that example because I think it's really good. So Andy Murray, right? Andy Murray, the English tennis player, phenomenally successful, okay? And now visually, this is where the self-made man myth is created, because visually you look at him on the tennis court and you think, wow, he's amazing. Now, if you go in and study, and I did, Andy Murray has a team of 6 people on his full-time staff just to look after him, full-time. Yeah, nutritionists, physiotherapists, trainer, physical trainer. Then he's got somebody who looks after the logistics of his life, travel arrangements, because that's a massive part of his business, of what he does. And he's got a full-time person who deals with all the travel, hotel booking, logistics. You know, his payroll for most, he's a small business. Now, he might be the visible front face of that business, but essentially he's responsible for 6 other people's full-time livings. But because we only see him out there doing what he does, we have an assumption that it's all on him. No, it isn't. He wouldn't even get to that. He wouldn't even get to that event if it wasn't for the team behind him.